Hey everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be painting this 3D apple using color washes and a few fun little techniques to get the texture on the apple. Here are the colors that I used for this tutorial. I used Serpentine Green, a Sap Green, a Permanent Red Deep, my Burnt Sienna, some Azo Yellow, and a little Moonglow for some shadows. And I ended up using a little Alizarin Crimson that I'll share with you later. I only used 3 brushes, a number 8 round, a 4 round, and a 1 round. So let's get started. As you can see from this inspiration photo, the character of this apple has these little light dots. I'm going to be using a little masking fluid, some Pebeo drawing gum, and I'm just using my little embossing tool to dot on that masking fluid. You could use a paintbrush. I just thought I had this tool handy. I thought let's give it a try. And farther down in the tutorial, I will be sharing another way that you can put in those little dots that is not masking fluid. So if you don't want to use masking fluid, I've got some other tricks for you. I'm starting off with a watery Azo Yellow. This is just going to be my first base layer. It's kind of my first color wash. This yellow will kind of peek through in places and will help our apple have some warmth to it. Azo Yellow is a warmer yellow. There are other yellows out there, so if you don't have this one, that's totally okay. This is just the color I happen to have. I think Gamboge yellow tends to be a warmer yellow also. Now I'm taking my Permanent Red Deep, which is also a warm red. I'm just placing it in there, letting it kind of spread into that yellow. It just kind of keeps things looking very soft. And we're going to be doing quite a few layers. As each layer dries, we'll be doing more color washes that will kind of help build the vibrancy and the dimension in this apple. And I'm not copying this inspiration photo completely. For me, it's just to give me a little reference of where my shadows are. I couldn't find one picture that I liked, so I actually put this inspiration photo together. The apples on my tree this year were not very pretty. There was a lot of wormholes and little places where the birds were pecking at them all summer. So I just took some pictures where I liked the leaf of one apple and I like the apple and the apple slice of something else. So I kind of cut and pasted this inspiration photo to be able to share with you. Now we're just dropping in a little bit of that Serpentine Green. And if you don't have this color, it's kind of a unique color. You can always just use a little bit of that watery Sap Green. That would work just fine. I just really love using the Serpentine Green. Now we're just going to drop in some more of that warm red, continuing to build that vibrancy. I'm just taking a little bit of tissue and just tapping out where I want my highlight to be. As you can see in the upper left corner there, we have where the light's hitting that apple, so I'm going to keep tapping out that little section as I do each layer to keep that highlight there. I'm just bringing in more of that red until I just build that vibrancy that I want. And then I realized the reason I'm not getting the depth that I want is that I needed to add a little bit of a cool red. I love this Alizarin Crimson. It's kind of a deep red with a cool tone to it, and it really helps add dimension. It almost creates a little bit of a shadow. That warmth still kind of peeks through in places, but this is where we're really going to start getting that roundness of the apple. And a lot of the subjects that I paint that are a red, I love my base layers to be a warm red and then a top layer to have that cool red. It really does help create dimension. I'm just kind of feeling this out as I paint and look at the inspiration photo. I'm just kind of making those guesses. Do I want a little more warm here? Do I want a little more cool there? It's just me kind of interpreting the photo myself. If you are interpreting the picture differently and want to use different colors, but just are looking at the techniques I'm using, it would be wonderful for you to just kind of experiment and do your own thing a little bit. Dropping in a little more of that yellow and a little more of that green. And so far we've just kind of done all of this wet on wet. At some point we'll be doing wet on dry, and we'll be letting this first layer dry. I'm just letting these colors melt together. It's kind of creating soft edges. We don't want anything to look harsh on our first layer. I realized I added a little too much liquid there, so I just used a clean brush to kind of tap that out. A little tissue there. You know, sometimes it's trial and error. We make little mistakes as we go, but most of them we can fix. There I go, tapping out that highlight again. Now we're going to let that apple dry completely, and then we're going to start working on our stem. Our first layer is going to be very simple, just using a little bit of that burnt sienna. We'll be adding more layers as we go. As each layer dries, we can add a little more detail in there. Now we're just going to wet our leaf. We're just going to do a very watery layer of that sap green. We're going to leave the edge where it hits the stem, where the leaf is kind of curled. We're going to leave that and do that after this portion of the leaf is dry. We're not working for any detail yet. I'm just trying to work on a little bit of the shape of the leaf. I'm using my smallest brush there. Now I'm just going to drop in a little bit of that yellow, let it kind of spread in there. It's going to give that base layer a little bit of texture. And here our stem is completely dry, so we're going to just add in Moonglow, a little bit of green to give a little different color, brown. If you don't have any Moonglow, you can use kind of a darker blue with your burnt sienna to kind of create a darker brown, or you could even just use like a burnt umber or a raw umber, just adding in a little bit of shadow. We'll continue to add detail and shadow as we go, but this is just kind of our first little step of shadow. As I got a little too dark with that shadow, so I'm just tapping it out a little bit. I'm not taking it fully out, I'm just adding a little bit of highlight there. And now I let that part of the leaf dry, and now we're going to work on the curl of the leaf. I'm just taking some of that Serpentine Green. You could just mix some of that Sap Green and some of that yellow if you want to use a lighter yellow. Then I decided I wanted it to be a little bit lighter, so I just took a clean brush and just kind of tapped out a little bit of that paint. Now we're just going to do a little negative painting with our Sap Green. I have my smallest brush, my number 1, and I'm just leaving the veining of the leaf light, and I'm painting around the edges of that veining with my Sap Green. And it kind of creates that leafy texture. And I already had my veining kind of drawn out on my leaf. So I'm just kind of following those lines. I'm not getting too detailed. I'm just kind of dropping in my color, trying to give a little bit of that effect of the veining. I will admit, doing negative painting was not easy for me. I'm still learning how to do it. I watch other artists do it and they make it look so easy, and you really have to think kind of opposite. What are you keeping light when you're adding in the dark? And sometimes that can be a little struggle. So I would just say practice. And if you don't feel very confident in this painting yet, just take a little scrap piece of watercolor paper and just practice. And with each painting I do that has negative painting, I have to really think about the process and really map out where I'm leaving my highlights. So if you struggle with this too, that's all right. With practice, it just gets a little bit easier. And just like anything, watercolor takes practice. We're not good at it just right out of the gate. We do have to practice these techniques. They can be quite challenging the first time that we try them, so don't get discouraged, just keep trying, and we'll do this together. Now we're going to start working on our apple slice, and I apologize, I thought I had focused my camera, so we have a few minutes here where it's just slightly blurry, so I apologize, but we're not working on any details, so I think we'll be okay. So it's not your eyeballs getting blurry, it's just my photography skills are not that wonderful. So I just kind of took some of that azo yellow and a little bit of that serpentine and mixed it together to make a very watery pale yellow to kind of start building that first layer of color on our apple slice. The interior of our apple is very pale, but it does have some color to it, and these colors will soften as they dry. Right now it kind of looks a little harsh, but they'll soften. I was getting a little impatient with my apple drying, so I just used my hair dryer to dry that first layer. Now I'm just going to wet this again, just the areas that I'm going to be using the red, because I just want it to blend in there soft. I don't want any harsh edges. Just taking my warm red, and yes, another kitty hair. I have one little kitty who likes to come and join me in my studio, and eventually her fur ends up on my paintbrushes and in my water, and that's just, I guess, part of the process of having pets. I'm bringing in my deeper red, just kind of at the bottom, letting that bleed into my warm red. Just bringing in a few little details there. Now I just want that yellow to melt into that red. Gives a nice little transition there. As I'm adding in my seeds, the other parts of my apple there are a little wet, so it kind of bleeds in there. Just take a little clean brush and just kind of drag that extra paint out of there. We're all guilty of making these little mistakes. I'll let that first layer dry, and now I'm just kind of adding in a little bit of shadow. I'm just going to take some watery Moonglow. I'm just going to kind of add in some more of that dimension there where the apple kind of indents where the seeds are. We're just kind of slowly building the dimension. I want this first layer of shadow to be very soft because we'll build up the shadow as we go. But I'm afraid of it being too harsh, so I'm trying to start off softly. And really, painting can be trial and error. Even somebody who has done watercolor for a long time, we run into little issues here and there, and we have to fix things as we go. So when I'm painting and making mistakes, I like to leave those in these videos because it helps you see how I remedy when I kind of make a mistake, go too far, or something doesn't quite turn out the way I think it's going to. And I think it's very beneficial for you to be able to learn from that. So I'm just going to continue to be adding in more of that shadow. As it kind of soaks in and lightens, I decide to add a little more here, a little more there. It really depends on the dimension that you're going for, how much shadow you want to stick in. And I'm just bringing up a little more vibrancy in my apple. Now I'm just going to take a little bit of that yellow, very watery. I'm just going to kind of place it over the top of that leaf. I just want to kind of soften that veining a little bit. Not much. I don't want to move that sap green anywhere. I'm just kind of lightly placing it there on top. Just finishing up a little bit of my shadows there in my apple slice. I just want the interior of that apple slice to be very soft. Just adding in a little bit of that apple texture. Now after my apple is fully dry, I'm going to take off that masking fluid to reveal our little spots of our apple. And I'm not just going to leave them bright white. I'm just taking a very clean brush with water. I'm kind of softening them. They'll still peek out there, but they won't be quite so bright white. They'll kind of blend a little bit better into the apple. Some I make a little darker, some I make a little lighter. Just tapping in a little bit of green there just to add kind of that character of the apple. The last of my shadow in my stem. And to tie in that leaf a little bit better with the apple, I'm just kind of adding a little reflection of that red. Kind of helps that leaf feel more a part of that apple and not so separate. Simple little things like that really help tie a whole painting together. Now we're just going to add our shadow underneath. Just adding in some water first so that our shadow is very soft. And then I messed up with my camera again. I thought I had turned it on, but I had turned it off, so I missed that first layer of shadow. But I'm just going to dry that first layer, and then I decided I wanted it a little darker, so I'm going in with some more of that Moonglow. Just getting it in there, and then I'll just bring a little more water to kind of soften the edges. And again, if you don't have the Moonglow, you could use a blue, a purple, mix a blue and a purple together, even some red and some blue. Just create your own mixture of shadow. I have one more little trick that I wanted to show you. After your painting is completely dry, you can take an X-Acto knife and just kind of scrape out little highlights, and you can add in some of those little dots onto your apple, little bits of texture. It's a simple way to add just the last of the texture. And there you have it, your finished apple. I hope to see you on the next tutorial.